Right. So, um, I try my best to be a good communicator. Try. So I put out a map of what's coming so that we're all on the same page. Today, I think today is this day. And so we're going to do some more radio only joint illusions and really try to, radio only joint's tough because there's so many distractions. There's so many distractions, and I'm trying to teach you to see the wrap and the unwrap. And so we're going to work on that today. Friday, we're going to do the wrist joint. The wrist is not complicated, but it can be complicated because it's going along for the ride on a lot of things. First example, right? That was hard to see how this was wrist motion unless we use kind of our landmark. Where am I at? Where did I go? How did I have to get there? And then next week, I try not to rush the second exam for 310 because there's a lot of, so you think back, there's a lot of joint motions and there's a lot of pelvic girdle stuff. And the intent of this class is to keep up with the material, little bites of the apple. If you wait until the last minute, it can be overwhelming. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do two things while I'm out of town, traveling to go do that auction for that veteran military charity. One is we're going to have a practical lab days face to face on next week, just like we did. I think I was pretty successful where I would zoom in. So I would pull in the Zoom, and then any questions that somebody would have in class while we're reviewing, I can be there to answer. And any questions anyone has that's zooming from home in real time, I can answer. And then you get the answer to those questions as well. Okay. Pros and cons. I love your feedback, please. On one end, I want to kind of chop these three practical lab days into sections, like where, we do like the midline stuff on Monday, cervical, trunk, pelvic girdle, hip kind of stuff. Then maybe Wednesday would be lower extremity, and then Friday would be upper extremity. So I like that. But then I'm like, well, what if someone has a question about anything at any time, right? So I'll kind of leave that up to you and the what's the group me? I keep forgetting. Maybe you guys can give that some thought on how do you want to approach next week. Now, in addition, I'm going to post Unit 3 lectures. Unit 3 lectures are how muscles influence joint motions. A lot of times in a lot of classes, you go on to a new unit and it has nothing to do with the previous unit. It's all new stuff. All we're saying is that we've taught you all the different motions. Now I'm going to teach you the concepts of how the strings influence those motions. So it still applies, but we don't want to wait until the last minute to pressure cook all that material. So those lectures are going to be posted next week. You can watch them on your own time. It won't, if you do watch them, it won't mess up any of this material. In fact, it will only help you practice for it because it's going to be the concepts of muscles influencing joint motion, which is what your exam 2 is on. However, once we're done with Unit 2, I will do a summary lecture, the so what of these lectures, just to catch you back up, okay? But I just want to make sure, guys, again, I don't know who scheduled our semesters. There's a rumor out there, Satan might be involved because we have these breaks, like right in the middle of when things are about to get heated with finals. We have like Thanksgiving break, we have so it's tough. It's really tough when you're trying to get into momentum, and then all of a sudden you practically have a week off, and then you come back and finals time, right? So just trying to stay ahead and be prepared and give you guys all the information and as much practice as we can get, okay? Any questions? What did y'all think about the radial ulnar joint stuff so far? Okay, all right. Let's continue into that. And I want to give this practical example that I used to give back in the day. And I was talking to a former student. I taught her and her husband, and they're both physical therapists. And they're like, Campbell, I love that analogy. And I was like, yeah, but sometimes I feel weird. I'd like, just say it. Like, all right. So the analogy that I came up with many moons ago is the radius and the ulna are a couple. You have the chicken wings, you have the one everybody wants, the drumstick, and then you have the flats and there's two bones on there. I mean, that's the human equivalent of the flat part of the wing, right? And so these two bones, the radius and the ulna, are a couple. They are, a couple. They're coupled. And in anatomical position, the analogy that I gave Jenny and Derek, her husband, is that in anatomical position, they are laying face forward if you're standing up, or if you're laying down in a supine position, they are face up. They are in a supine position. If I could draw some little eyes on the radial head. Okay. The concept of pronation is when the radius rotates. I love that R to R. Okay. In an open chain, the radius rotates. And what the radius is going to do is spoon. Can't believe I'm saying this, but she said it worked really well. The radius is going to wrap its body around its partner, the ulna. Like give him a hug. But keep the head on the same pillow, if you think about it. So the radius is wrapping its body around the ulna while still keeping its head on its pillow. And that's how you get the body going from lateral. The head is always going to be lateral, but the body, the feet can actually go to the medial part. Does that make sense? So it's wrapped or spooned and unwrapped. So that's why this works. Since the wrist doesn't twist, the wrist can't rotate in its transverse plane. That's why when you pronate, it goes along for the ride. Unwrapped, wrapped. And we use the thumb rule to help us see when the thumb is lateral. That's only because the radial styloid, which is part of the radius, is lateral. And when the thumb goes medial, it's because the radial styloid went medial. So even though I'm saying thumb, and you're like, well, the thumb isn't part of the radius, it's attached to the radius, and it can't move in the transverse plane, so the thumb will always be radial side. That'll be a hint when we go into wrist motion. The thumb will always be radial side. The pinky will always be ulna side. So that's why we can use this rule, these internal, intrinsic local landmarks to help us figure out radial ulnar joint position. How about a bunch of practice? Okay, ready? And remember, you can take pictures, but you have the video if you want to go back and rewatch it. All right. We see motion as change in position. Here's my start position. We're going to analyze radial ulnar joint. I go from here to there. My fingers are pointing to my left. Let me mirror it for you. And then I do this. In the Etch-a-Sketch. Start. Finish. Start. Finish. And I'll tell you why I do that. Because if I go back the same road, it may get confusing which one I was asking. So after I do it, shake the Etch-a-Sketch to start over. Okay, here's my start. Here's my finish. Figure it out on your own. I would love for you to ask a neighbor, hey, what did you get? If you're getting the same thing, great. That's a good sign. If you're not getting the same thing, great. You get a chance to discuss it and see why y'all are getting different answers. I'll do it one more time. Start, finish. You're alone. It's crazy. I'm sure you pay a fee for it. Sorry, you guys are cool. All right, guys, I'd love to spend more time, but it's kind of a catch-22. I want to give you time, but I also want to give you a lot of examples. Okay. Where's my starting position? Remember, analyze joint by joint. It's okay if you bring everything back to anatomical except for the joint you're analyzing. You just have to make sure you don't move it while you do so. In other words, this is a good example. If you're like, well, I'm not quite sure up here, but let me bring it down. You can't actually move the radial ulnar joint as you bring it down. You're going to get the wrong answer. That's why last class I did this silly example to show you this is actually bringing it down. Okay, so you just have to be careful. The radial ulnar joint has nothing to do with my wrists. The radial ulnar joint has nothing to do with my elbows. The radial ulnar joint has nothing to do with my shoulders. This is my start position. My left one is wrapped, my right one is unwrapped. My left one is prone, my right one is supine. Or I can use my thumb rule. Medial. It's the medial part of my arm. It's the inside part of my arm. Do we agree? This is the lateral part of my arm. Do we agree? So my thumb is medial, bless you. So I'm wrapped here. I'm prone here. Thumb rule. There's the inside of my arm. Ooh, but no thumb. I'm Mario. And no thumb. My lateral. I'm unwrapped. I'm supine. Yes? You get it? So I start being prone and I end up being supine. My thumb went from being on the inside of my arm to being on the outside of my arm. I had left radial ulnar joint supination. Cool. On my right, my thumb went from being lateral to being medial. I had right radial ulnar joint pronation. The thumb rule is a great rule that I invented, that I'm passing to you. And I say I invented it with you guys because as I get feedback, I had to come up with different ways to try to visualize it. And so as I got feedback from students, I kind of developed this intrinsic landmark rule that always works because the wrist doesn't twist. If the wrist gets spin in its transverse plane, we couldn't use that rule, but we can. All right, you ready for another one? Okay, here we go. Let's see. I'm going to start off. Oh, I thought of it this morning. Okay. Start here. Remember, the hands are quicker than the eyes. Not that we're quick, it's our eyes can only process so many frames per second. Thus why it's so important to use landmark changes. A joint can't spin 360 degrees. That puts us in a position of power. If I start in a certain position and then I end in a different position, we can infer how you had to get there. Okay? So I think I started like this, and I ended like this. And for bonus points, even though we're analyzing radial ulnar joint, just for practice, tell me what happened at the shoulder. Just for practice. Last time. Start. Finish. Go. Usual part, she would say, thank you for your patience. And it's like, I was not being patient. There's no reason to thank you. Start off with the shoulders. Right shoulder had flexion, left shoulder had extension. Cool. And if we wanted to do scapula upward and downward rotation, right scapula had upward, left scapula would have been downward. Arm goes up, scapula is going to go up, arm goes down, scapula is going to. Now let's get to radial ulnar joint. Am I prone or supine in my starting position? Prone. Face down. Thumb rule is medium. Okay. We analyze joint by joint. So I can't assume my right is still medial. So my right radial ulnar joint had no motion at all. But my left is now lateral. See that? So the only way to go from prone to supine is to have left radial ulnar joint supination. And the trick is we didn't have to see it. Because again, magicians have the sleight of hand. We didn't have to see it to know it. I didn't have to see it to know, well, if I started off wrapped and I ended not wrapped, my radius can't re-wrap itself around, snap off, and then appear back on the other side. I had to have supination. Cool. Any questions or follow-up before we go to the next example? All right, here we go. Let me give you a second to figure out position. And I'm purposefully popping my thumbs out, but my thumbs could be here, and I can't. My thumb can move, but it's not like I can make my thumb go to the other side. That would be a Mr. Potato Head. So start off with assessment of position and make sure you do side, like, hey, the left is, the right is. Okay. Start here, and then I do this. This was first exam stuff for the wrist, but now we're adding the radial. Start, my right palm is up, my left palm is down. But remember, don't use palm up or palm down as because I've showed you that I could have my palm up and be the opposite. I'm just explaining my position to make sure you start in the same place I start. From here, I do this. Start, finish. Technically, which I'd like to practice, we can assess wrist because if you remember, first exam was sagittal wrist. So we could do flexion, extension. The only part I haven't given you is the whole next deviation part yet. So we could practice wrist position. Did I go from being extended to flexed? Did I go from flexed to extended? Or did I stay extended or did I stay flexed? Follow the fingers. The fingers will show you the way to flexion. Give that a minute. Grace, were you a mover on the exam? And I'm not talking about like doing like Broadway musical motions, but did you do some?
Yeah, especially the ones that was like, I'm not sure about, but last year it's a good one. It's all in just so like, even just going back here to make sure.
You remember catching yourself on a couple that? Yeah. Start position. My right radial ulnar joint is supine. And it goes from being supine to being prone. And the only way that can happen is if I have pronation. Does that make sense? My wrist is extended. Now my wrist is flexed. The only way that can happen is if I have flexion. So what happened is these two motions happened at the same time, flexion and pronation. These two motions happened at the same time, pronation, flexion. These two motions happened at the same time. So this left one. See, this was up, this was down. Prone, supine. I had to have supination. Flexed, extended. I had to have extension. These two motions happened at the same time. When it happens together, it looks like this. They cancel out. So sometimes these motions are hard to see. Thus why we need landmark changes to see them. Okay. How about this one? You go to scratch behind your back. And I'm curious if you are in a prone position or a supine position when you go back there to scratch your back. Mostly, let's go mostly, because we're all built a little different, and maybe somebody has some different ranges of motion. But are you mostly prone, or are you mostly supine when you go to scratch behind your back? Give it some thought. Also, fun fact, you're going to find that arm dominance has a lot to do with how far you can get back there. That's always fun. Like you do like your dominant arm, and then you go to your non-dominant arm, and you're like, oh gosh, big difference. Here's a cool trick. You should be able to move. Like you should be able to test your theory or your hypothesis. Meaning, if you say, "Oh, I am supinated," well, if you're supinated, you shouldn't be able to supinate from that position. Like in other words, if like I'm supinated, well, you shouldn't be able to go any further. And if you're all the way pronated, you should be able to test it and say, "Hey, if I'm pronated, I shouldn't be able to pronate it." Just like we did last class, if I'm semi, I should be able to pronate and supinate. So it's really a good little check where you're back there and you're like, all right, I should be able to not go in a certain direction more than another direction. Okay. So back here, you are mostly pronated. This is the lateral part of my arm, and my thumb is on the medial. Okay. This is an example of analytical thinking. And I'm only telling you this because I care. We ring the bell, we're pattern recognizers. That's one of the things that makes us really good humans. We pattern recognize. We've been pattern recognizing for thousands of years. Stars, and when the wind starts blowing, or when we start to smell certain things, there might be a storm coming, before we had Rob Perillo. We pattern recognize. That can also get us into trouble sometimes because we make assumptions based off of patterns. So for this one, guys, you're scratching your back, and I established that we happen to be in a prone position. But now I want you to scratch your back from the top. Scratch your back from the top and tell me if there's anything different or if it's the same. Different? Different? What position are we in now? We're in a supine position. So again, it has nothing to do with scratch back. I don't want you to pattern recognize and say, oh, every time I scratch my back, it must be. We don't assume. We analyze. Every time. Make sense? Okay. All right, let's go back to Old Faithful. Let's talk about radio on a joint. I start here, and I do this. If you're following at home, I think we went hands away, right over left, interlock, and move. And talk to me about radio on a joint motion. One more time, hands out. So hands in front and hands away, like they're facing away from each other. Right over left, interlock. And tell me what happened to the radio on the joints. Good. Or prone, right? This is where the magic happens. So in other words, when my elbows were extended, I couldn't bilaterally supinate, or I was going to, I was going to, my hands apart. But the magic happens when I'm here. And now my radial ulnar joints can be mirrors to each other. Kind of cool. So I have bilateral radial ulnar joint supination, bringing my thumbs from medial to lateral.
If you would have started like this, so say this was our position, and then you ended up still
Yeah.
heavy, no joint motion at all. Would there be no motion?
No, what if you start pronated and in supinated, you had to have joint motion.
No.
I'm sorry.
You started supinated. Like, so you started like, so say this was
But you're pronated then.
why,
No, you're fine. No, this is great. That's part of the illusions your brain plays on you.
So I'm thinking about, like, it says, that was sort of a question like that. Would there be no motion observed?
Absolutely. In fact, we have precedent for that in other areas of the body, right? Like, I gave you one on the test where the person was doing a curl and they moved everything except for the elbows. And we said there was no motion. Or when the leg went back, there was no motion. Or when the shoulder went back and there was no motion. So 100% there can be questions where there is no motion. But if there's no motion, that just means the radial ulnar joint stayed in the same position. Other things might move. But I started lateral, I stayed lateral. But yeah, there can be questions where there's no motion. Absolutely. I'll give you one right here, just for rewarding y'all for either coming to class or watching the videos. I think this is a good example of a no motion that looks like there's motion. Okay? Start. Radial ulnar joint. I'm going to ask that question. And I'm going to make a promise. Yes, ma'am.
Will you specify that it's radial ulnar?
Have to. Absolutely. And if I don't, the specificity is going to be in the answer choices. So like, radial ulnar joint this, radial ulnar joint that, radial ulnar joint this, radial ulnar joint that. And so, and That's why I stopped doing none of these. If I'm asking about the shoulder, it'll be shoulder this, it'll be shoulder that, it'll be shoulder this, absolutely. So if I don't specify, because one of the things I've got some bad feedback for is by trying to be a good communicator, sometimes I over communicate and it can get confusing. So at the end of the day, it's what happens from start to finish, and here are your choices to tell me what happened. And I've gotten with some feedback that that's the best way to avoid any kind of, well, I thought you meant, I thought you meant. But absolutely, I got to tell you. Yeah. What was I going to say? I'll pick it. Oh, yeah. I was going to make a deal with you. Guys, I'm telling you, this question is going to be on the test. I'm making a proclamation. I'm going to ask this question on the test. And if everybody can get it right, you guys here, you guys watching, group me's, me groups, group me's, Bucky's, I don't care. If everybody gets it right in the class, you know the question's coming. If everybody gets it right, I will compensate the entire class accordingly. But if one person gets it wrong, I'm sorry, you hit a landmine. I've been doing games like this for almost 20 years. I'm waiting. But here's the lesson. Here's the lesson. Well, that's not true, because you can just have students that just don't study. Or they think, this is another problem I get sometimes too, talking with students is, well, I thought I knew this stuff already. I've been a personal trainer for 4 years. You know, I passed my Bucky's personal training test. I'm a fit crosser and a snap fitter and I'm all that stuff. Look at me. And I'm like, yeah, look at me. I'm nothing. I'm not a snap fitter or a cross jumper or none of that stuff. But I know human movement and I know illusions. Okay. And that's what I'm trying to make you better than I could ever be by teaching you all of my mistakes. Okay. Where do we go? Here, we did here to here. What was the radial joint motion? But you want to say it is because you went from the back of the hand to the front of the hand. That's your brain saying, well, I had to do something. But this isn't what happened. I just basically took the spoon and I said, well, you see the back of the spoon and I'm wrapped. And now you see the front of the spoon and I'm still wrapped. That's all you're doing. It's like taking a shovel and saying, I see the back of the shovel and now I see the front of the shovel. I didn't have to spin the shovel. Make sense? I hope everybody gets that right. But absolutely, that's what I'm assessing. I couldn't do this and then ask you about the ankle, right? So I'm absolutely going to ask you. I'm going to clarify. And if I don't, I will, but I'm not perfect. That's when it's fair for you to ask a clarification question. And I'll look at it and I'll say, that question has everything you need to answer it. Or I'll look at it and say, gosh, you're right. Let me clarify. Those are the kind of questions I can't answer. You know the kind of questions I can't answer? I think it's moving and I think, am I on the right track with, get out of here. Get out of here. Get out of here. I don't mean that literally. I want you guys to say it's a metaphor. Y'all want a few more practice? Are these helping? Is it helping? All right. Remember, guys, the mirror effect. It may look like things are moving together, but they're not. All I'm doing is doing this, and I'm putting it in a different position. So it might look like they're moving the same way, but actually this is moving the same way. with the mirror effect, as I touched on before, okay? So don't say, oh, they're going in the same way. So if you assess one, you assume the other one is doing the same thing. Do you understand what I'm saying by that? Okay. This is actually the same motion, not this. No. Oh, the upright row. Okay. This is one of my favorite illusions. Okay. We do have to make some assumptions. One is that our elbows are going to come up nice and high. Remember, we talked about when you abduct, to clear your shoulder, there's going to be some external rotation that happens. You can actually kind of see it as I bring my elbow, my shoulder up. You see this, my arm does this. Okay. But we're going to use landmarks for assessment. We're going to use our thumb rule. So what I'd like for you to do is assess potential radial ulnar joint motion. Sometimes motion helps us to maintain our grip on things. It's one of the great things about our radial ulnar joint. We can move to help summate, or we can help move to cancel out. Okay. So my grip is underneath the bar. And I'd like for you to assess my radial ulnar joint motion. And I'm sure it looks like, well, nothing moved. I mean, your grip is still under the bar. That's what I want to show you and teach you with this example, that my radial ulnar joint had to move in order to keep my grip under the bar. So let's use our thumb rule. Where did I start? Where did I finish? And how did I have to move to get there? Start. Finish. That's the goal. Or try it out yourself. You don't have to have a bar. Keep your hands close and try to bring your thumbs as high as possible to your chin. Oh. Isn't it cool how much stuff we can learn without PowerPoints? Huh? I'm not anti-PowerPoint. That's just not my thing. Campbell said he hates PowerPoint. There's just a lot of different ways to teach. I personally like to use PVC pipe. Broken skeletons. Broken lightsabers, Kindles. There's another one I'm going to ask on the test. Did the radial ulnar joint move? Well, let's use some landmarks. Would you all agree that I started off being in a prone position? Okay. If I stayed prone, let's do a thought experiment. If I stayed wrapped, if I stayed prone, this is what it would look like. If I stayed prone, this is what it would look like. If I stayed wrapped, the bar would now be at my thumbs. So to keep my fingers under the bar, I have to supinate as I go. Let's check our thumb rule. We all agree that I started off being prone. Grace, come do me a favor, please. You don't have to do the sound effects. I'll do the sound effects. But walk my thumb down my forearm. So start on my thumb. Walk it down. Stay right there. It's the lateral side. Give it up for Grace. Dang, man. Tough crowd, Grace. But you know what? They're all going to be asking you for help from the test. They're going to be clapping for you now. Supination. You see it. See it? Guys, it's okay not to see it. Because right now, if you don't see it, it doesn't count against you on your test. Questions? Do you see it?
Can you do it one more time?
I make it better. You come to it.
Gosh.
Well, we don't have to put you on camera.
Okay. I just.
Come on. Come on. Because it's not about seeing it. I want you to feel it. So we're going to go here. Okay. And so now, if you stay, bring it up like you're doing a row. If you stay prone,
Okay.
you have to supinate. Felt it?
Yeah.
Bang.
Okay.
And so that's what's happening. Now it's happening at the same time you move your shoulders, so you don't necessarily feel it.
Okay.
But you have to feel lateral.
Yeah.
You went from being on the inside. There it is. Being on the outside.
Gosh, that makes perfect. Okay.
Here's what's happening. Here's what's happening. Here's what's happening. We're wrapped. Obviously, I could just do one at a time, but I'm here. I'm gripping the bar. Cool. Watch this. Notice how the radius is wrapped around the element. It's hard for us to see because we're only used to moving like the cap about the bottle. See some comic illusions. So guys, this is what's happening. Watch how cool. Bring it up, and there's the unwrap. There's the wrap. There's the unwrap. So cap and bottle. So what's happening is you're not wrapping. We're not wrapping and unwrapping the radius because our radius is connected proximal and distally. We're wrapping and unwrapping the ulna. It's the cap and the bottle. You see it? Wrapped, unwrapped, wrapped, unwrapped. Everybody stand up. I'll give this last example to try to prove my point. If you lean on your desk or your table and you internally and externally rotate your shoulders, so in other words, you should see your bicep. Try to keep your elbow locked. You should see your bicep spinning in the transverse plane. Okay? So far, so good. Your distal segment, your hand is fixed, and your proximal segment, your shoulder socket is also fixed, right? Your glenoid fossa. If only your humerus were rotating, you would rip apart your humerus at your elbow. If only your humerus, because this is fixed, and this is fixed. So what I'm trying to show you is that the radial ulnar joint has to move with the shoulder to cancel out that rotation. It's like when you're here, you could do a thumb roll. And then when you do this, you could also do a thumb roll and you say, I'll be darned. I went from being wrapped to unwrapped. And I could see my humerus rotating. My point is that your radial ulnar joint is going to work with your humeral rotation to cancel out some things. And we use landmarks to see how that is. Okay? All right, we're good? All right, I hope that was helpful. Y'all have a good day.